So, welcome to today's talk. We are going to talk about modernization of Kenyan society and the impact it has had on the value system of the society. So, to get us started, we begin by defining the term modernization. And to help us in this process, we borrow from Oxford Dictionary definition of the term modernization. According to the dictionary, modernization is the process of making a system, methods more modern and more suitable for use at the present time. So, in other words, modernization is the process of ensuring that systems and ways of doing things are more current, they are more contemporary, and they serve the needs of the people. So, they are suitable for use by the people in the present time. So to help us to visualize this, put up a picture of Nairobi, and in that slide you can see Nairobi in two faces, the black and white face and the colored face on your right. So if you look at the pictures on the left, you see Nairobi is less modernized. The streets are simple, the buildings are simple, we have the old British architectural style of buildings. I think that is what was the Norfolk Hotel during those days. And you can see that the transport system is very rudimentary. The vehicles are very simple, and so are the buildings. So on the right side, you see that the society has transformed, or the Nairobi society, Kenyan society has transformed, and the buildings are more contemporary, they are more modernized. We see better constructed buildings which are more sophisticated. We see an improved lighting system, and with that, we see the emergence of a better transport system. And although transport has improved generally in Nairobi from the colonial era, we still have challenges with our road system. The Kenyan social system has gone through transformation since independence. When the country got its independence, the society has transformed, has changed in many ways. And some of the reasons that have contributed to this change is the increased access to education. Prior to independence, education was very limited, but after independence, we saw a greater expansion in the education system. The Commission of Education that came into place after independence placed emphasis on expansion, and so more schools were constructed. Africans were allowed to pursue education beyond the primary level and even to university. And many Africans left the country to move to the United States to pursue education. The other factor is because of democratization. The influence of Western ideals and American democratic principles have had a greater impact on the Kenyan political landscape, and a lot of democratic values have been adopted into the mainstream society, and these have influenced the way the social structure is defined, the way the political structure is organized, and even the system of government. The other factor is the influence of Christianity. Christianity being the predominant religion in Kenya. Others include Hinduism, Islam, but predominantly Christians are the majority of the population. And as a result of the advent of Christianity in its various manifestations, Christianity in the form of Catholicism, Protestantism, and the other minor Christian denominations, these ideals from this Christian doctrine has influenced the society right from the level of the family. So we see a lot of people now changing from the traditional way of doing things to embracing more Christian based principles, that are founded on the teachings of the Bible. And so, for instance, you see values which were traditionally acceptable, like polygamy, now getting less and less acceptable, and people moving towards single, what we call it, well, what we call men marrying only one wife. Previously, it was okay for a man to marry several wives because of the traditional values, but with Christianity coming in, this has been differently approached, and more people are now shunning such practices. And then moving forward, we see westernization, generally the influence of Europe, Africa, and Kenya in particular, has a lot of interaction with the Western world through the social media, through the mass media, and through physical encounters as people travel across the borders. And that has made it possible for values to be infused in Kenyan society, values that have Western orientation. So we see a lot of more pluralistic society. We see a lot of more liberal approach to issues, acceptance for what previously was not there. So westernization has brought its on its wake a set of value systems which have also influenced the Kenyan society. The other factor is the knowledge accessibility. With the expansion of education and, of course, in the modern times, the internet, we see greater access to knowledge. And with knowledge access, it means people have more access to information, and therefore they can learn more. And with this knowledge access, it means people change their perspectives towards issues. We see people changing perspectives towards issues like gender, feminism, issues like marriage, single gender marriages, issues to do with global occurrences like migration, people understanding more about climate change, and that affects the way they behave, and that affects their value systems. And as a result of that, we see social transformation in our society. So, to help us understand the concept of modernization, I borrow from the theory of modernization, which was originally developed by Max Weber, but later on expanded by Talcott Parsons. So, some of the premises, the fundamental premises of this theory is that it identifies the social variables that contribute to social progress and development of society, and seeks to explain the process of how the society evolves. So that means in a process of social change or social evolution, there are certain factors that come into play in order to bring about that social change. And these factors are varied. They include things to do with gender. They include with the issues to do with the economical factors, the cultural factors, and also the religious factor. So broadly, these are factors which contribute to social progress. So a society that moves forward in terms of development has to be understood from the perspective of those various dimensions. So we could therefore say that society cannot be considered as progressive, for example, if the economic conditions or the socio-economic conditions of the population are not desirable. So social change can only be possible if there is economic empowerment, social empowerment, and so these factors come into play. They interact with others to define what is social progress and to explain how the society moves from one stage of evolution to another. The second premise of this theory of modernization It also looks at internal dynamics of the society. Within any society, there are several factors that are dynamically relating to each other. So just as I said previously, this could be issues to do with the culture, for example, how is the social structure of the society organized? How are the family units? How do various units in the family interact with each other? How do the various families within the society relate with others? And how do they come to a common understanding, or even sometimes to a point of misunderstanding? So if you relate this to Kenyan society, we see Kenyan society is largely made of a nuclear family, which is also associated with an extended family. So how do these family structures relate to with each other? So one of the cultural aspects of the Kenyan social structure is that there's a lot of extended family ties, as opposed to what you'd find in Western cultures and American society, where the immediate family is more nucleic and centered. Kenyan society has a wider and a more complex family structure. So beyond the immediate family of the mother, the father, and the children, we have extended family of uncles, relatives, and so on. But beyond that, we also have the clan or the lineage. So you find that within a village, for example, every family is considered as part of the larger village community. So there is a saying that it takes a village, for example, in Africa to raise a child. And that is an extension of the internal dynamics of the society that we are talking about. So we see that the larger community is not seen in isolation, but it is seen as being a component of the families. So families play a bigger role, and they have a responsibility to one another within the larger communal setup. So these are the internal dynamics that are referred to here by the theory of modernization. So as the society changes, it's a reflection of what changes are happening within the families. So in Kenyan society, during the process of change, that has been a reflection of the change that has emanated from the family. Then the third component of this theory, it seeks to suggest that traditional societies develop as they adopt more modern practices. This is essentially true because we see that the socio-economic development that we have experienced in Kenya as a country is largely as a result of the influence of practices which are modernized, and these emanate from the, like I said earlier, from Europe and America. Then the proponents of modernization theory also say that modern states are wealthier and more powerful if their citizens enjoy a higher standard of living. Again, this is true without even saying much about it, because modernization brings in better ways of doing things, better economic ways, better more ways of production. And with these better ways of production, we see enhanced productivity, and with enhanced productivity, we see a growth in gross domestic product, and that helps to bring economic development, economic empowerment. So we now move on to see the dynamics of modernization. Modernization can be seen in form of various factors that I consider the elements of dynamism in a modern society. So these are represented in this diagram, which is on the slide. So the largest circle represents our social system, the Kenyan social system. And the Kenyan social system does not exist in its own. The Kenyan social system does not exist in isolation because we see it is a reflection of modernization, the influence of modernization, and the influence of globalization on the one hand. So that is the largest sphere but of the system. But within that largest sphere and the influences of these two major forces, there are other internal dynamics or internal elements that interact with each other to define the value system of the Kenyan society. One of those components is technology, the influence of technology. We all see and do appreciate the role that technology has contributed to changing the Kenyan society. In terms of internet, we see a greater accessibility to internet. We see greater use of social media, mass media, and the influence of industrialization or industrial development. All these technological adaptations come with a set with values which are transmitted to those that interact with the technological components, and that itself influences the value system of those that in interaction. Then on the other side, we see the family structure, like I mentioned earlier, the structure in which the family is organized in Kenyan society is of three types. We have an extended family structure, stroke nucleic structure, where the immediate family is also extended to the neighbor, to the uncles, or the aunties, the grandparents, and so on. We also see that our Kenyan social structure, family structure, is largely paternalistic, which means the head of the family is the father, and the father has the largest say in terms of how the family is organized and how the family operates. And so within this, there are also certain sets of values relating to the role of the father, the role of the mother in terms of gender role definition. And then we also see that in recent times, the single parent families are also coming up. More young women choosing to have children and raise their children on their own. And so this is influenced by, again, certain value systems which define what they consider as a family. So with the single family structures, again, we see a different manifestation of value systems. Then on the bottom of the diagram, we see the individual value system. Individuals have their own personal value system, which I mentioned. They derive from various sources, including the religion, the influence of westernization, and the influence of social media, as well as the influence of the family. So we see now a movement towards more individualistic family structures, more individualistic values, where people prefer to stay alone to preserve and protect their personal space, move from what was previously collectivism, which was a more traditional way of looking at things. And individual values have also been influenced by democracy, democratic values, which I mentioned earlier from Western and American influence. And so that has brought what we can consider a sense of egocentrism. People are becoming more self-centered, and it's focused on what is important for them with little regard of what others may think or how others may be leading their lives. Now, our individual values are also influenced by what we call consider rationalization. People have become more reasonable as a result of education. They're able to think and they're able to make decisions based on what the rational processes that they have undergone informs them about. So generally, those are the dynamics that we see in our modern society. So that brings us then to the discussion of what are national values versus individual values. So Kenyan society can be looked at in those two broad dichotomies. On one side, we have the national values. These values, which include patriotism, national unity, human dignity, equality, social justice, and equity. The values which we consider national values are enshrined in the new constitution. Kenya promulgated a new constitution in 2010, and within this constitution, we have what we call national values, which every Kenyan has to aspire to. Here at Kenyatta University, we take this very, very seriously and we attach a lot of importance to it. We have a National Value Week, and during this week, people come and engage on national dialogue on these values. So the purpose is really to entrench a value system of a national nature within the people. We want to build a society that is more patriotic to itself, to the country. We want to see young people, everybody being united, leading a dignified life, and we want to see equality in terms of gender issue and in terms of economic empowerment, equality in terms of access to education, and so on. We also would like to have a better and a fair justice system where everybody in the society has got equal access to resources, has got equal rights, have got equal responsibility. So Kenya is working towards creating a more democratic space so that people can exercise their freedom within the defines and the confines of the law. We also see a move towards greater equity in terms of gender equity, between different economic, geographical regions. We see equity in terms of access to resources, access to information, and access to knowledge. So on the other hand, we have the individual value system that emanate from individuals themselves. And the value system of individual have changed from the traditional perspective. We see, like I mentioned in the previous discussion, a lot of egocentrism, self-centeredness, people having a space around themselves and wanting to have more autonomy in terms of what they do and what they think. And that is influenced by a sense of preserving the self, in preserving the sense of identity. And this has also led to a lot of consumerism, the influence of the Western culture, the influence of the internet and mass media advertising has also brought about consumerism. So this is more noticeable, especially in the urban center where people have adopted the Western way of life. So you see rapid emergence of supermarkets, malls, and all that, and people spend weekends shopping and buy things which sometimes they do not really need, but they are influenced by the consumeristic culture that is emanating from social media, from the internet, from what they watch on TV, and from the influence of interaction with the Western world, which is more advanced in terms of resource development, resource availability, and which is also more consumeristic in nature. So the philosophy that one would call the me first is gaining more prominence in the lives of individual Kenyans, and that has an effect on the kind of values that they hold. So it is also important to say that the national values and the individual values are interrelated and they influence one another. On one hand, the kind of value system that individuals hold will greatly determine the prevailing value system at the national level. And what is prevailing at the national level influences individuals at the microeconomic level. So again, if you look at these values from a macroeconomic macro perspective and a micro perspective, you see that the two spheres of influence are related to each other. There is no clear-cut dichotomy and say these are national values, therefore these are the individual values, and the two components are isolated and mutually independent. They are mutually interdependent and they influence one another as we discuss the values of our society. So, ladies and gentlemen, how then do we move forward with this understanding? And that takes us to the next level where we talk about change and transformation. We need to transform, and to help us that, we conceptualize the process of change using the Barrett 7 levels of consciousness. And the Barrett 7 level of consciousness look at the transformation process from both a personal level and a national level. So if you look at that diagram, you see that the process of change can be conceptualized in form of two pyramids, one inverted pyramid and one normally standing pyramid. So the one is upside down and this one is the right, the normal size. So if you look at the pyramid on the bottom, you see that it's divided into three steps or three layers. We have the survival, relationship, and self-esteem. So if we look at the process of value evolution in an individual, we look at the first influence of value systems in an individual is really the need to survive. People need to survive. And so whatever people do, whatever decisions that they make are driven by the need for survival. And so you find there's a lot of self-preservation. People want to preserve their own interest. But as they move forward, we see that once they are secure and their social space is secure, the psychological needs for survival have been met, then they are able to think about others. And so they move on a step further. They're able to make better relationships with each other. They seek friends who share the same values. They also do so because they want to feel more loved. They want to become part of the greater network. And so they move towards relationship building. And once they build their relationship, that satisfies their need for self-esteem. So they feel more loved. They develop a greater sense of self-worth, and that removes the negative influences of things like fear. So once they remove the fears within and they gain sense of self-worth, we move on to that circle in the middle there, which we call the phase of transformation. So transformation there comes in when individuals move from the stage of fear, letting go of fear and finding meaning in their own existence. So they see themselves as part of their greater whole. And that leads to what we call internal cohesion. So they see themselves as part of the society, a larger society, that is defined by mutual coexistence. And for mutual coexistence, they have to look at common good. And so the values that become more important are the values of honesty, authenticity, working, getting along with others, and so forth. So later on, as the individual moves further, they move to the process of seeking to make a difference, and they do so by getting into selfless service and serving the society. So that's the process of social transformation from a personal level. And of course, on the other side, we see the same process being mirrored out at the national level. So, ladies and gentlemen, we want to thank you so much for paying time to listen to my presentation. And I do hope that you'll be, at the end of it, we'll have a meaningful conversation, and I'll be able to engage with the questions that you may have. So thank you so much, and have a blessed time.